All right, y'all. Welcome to For the Artists, a podcast brought to you by Creative M Projects. I'm your host, Melissa Sharee, and I am here with a very special WCW. As you guys know, in celebration of Women's Month, I have invited some very amazing women to come on with me on Wednesdays. So today, my woman crush, her name is MARIA WHALEN. She is a true pioneer of individual health freedom. She is transforming alternative and Western medicine worldwide. We're going to get into that. But listen, here's the thing that really struck me. After battling back from near death and healing herself completely of so called incurable diseases, Maria created her groundbreaking Invincible Wellness System. Maria reveals how to become your own doctor and gain complete control of your own health so you never have to become sick again. She is the figure that industry leaders, entrepreneurs, and titans of businesses turn to for invincible health. Not only is she knowledgeable in health and wellness, but she has like a ton of things going on. She's just a wealth of information and she's a true gem. Maria, welcome to For the
Thank
Artists.
you. What a very, very gracious and sweet intro. I appreciate it.
Listen, I could go on and on because there are so many wonderful things and highlights about you. So, let me start here. Take us back to this near death experience that you had because that just blows my mind. You don't meet very often people that have near death experiences and look at you, look amazing.
So funny. Yeah, I think there's probably more out there. I think people don't share their story, and all
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. But yeah, cool. I mean, I can dive into it. It's a pretty intense story. It takes a long time, but I can nutshell it.
Nutshell it.
The other thing you could do is I have a online workshop that I usually give away as a gift, and I
Oh,
tell my whole story on there. So if somebody really wanted to hear the whole thing, but
okay.
I mean, basically, yeah, I mean, a timeline. I'm going to be almost 48 in a couple months. And
No.
so, yeah. And, it actually, when you listen to my story, that this part obviously is not as up to date, but, I have a 2-year-old now and I have a 16-year-old. So the story is actually referring to my first child. And it's a long story, but I had the typical things that I see nowadays after working with human bodies for 17 years now, is that we tend to ignore the little things, and society as a whole kind of in this it's like there's Western and alternative, right? These systems, so I call them
Mhm.
these systems, but as a whole, we've kind of, as a culture, I would say, because I've traveled the world a lot, and you don't see this as much in a lot of other cultures that have kind of more historic roots that are still in play, where I think it's more American that I'm talking about, which is, it's like these little symptoms that we've been told are normal, no big deal, that kind of thing, and a lot of people suffer and walk around with them and think, well, there's nothing you could do about it, or, it's not life or death, right?
Mhm.
But the problem is those, anytime we don't deal with something, it stacks. And our body is, the way our body works is it will eventually say something and it'll get louder and louder and louder. So the little things are really the big things. And that's, for me, for many years, I kept getting all the little diagnoses on top of it. I literally have had almost everything that could relate to a female. Anything that isn't relatable to a male, I've had everything under the sun.
Whoa.
So I mean, literally, I could go literally a long, long list. So usually at any time people would call or, apply to work with my team and myself, I would always be like, oh, yep, I had that. Yep, I had that, and it was like, wow, I can relate to a lot. But basically, it was many years of that. And as you ignore those things, they get bigger and bigger, like I said. And it got into a point where I had 3 rare autoimmune diseases. And one of them would put me into a coma, and the comas would get more frequently, more and more frequent. And so about every other week and that kind of thing. And it got to be to where that process was really exhausting. And, um, I didn't like the toll it would take on other people in my life, and I didn't like being the center of attention for that, where it was like,
Mhm.
oh, and I didn't also like the gamut that I had to go through with, going to the emergency room or going through this and the tests and the battery of tests and the this and this, only to be told there's nothing wrong, or nothing we can do.
Mm,
You're going to hear one of those two things at the end of that story, right? So, long story short, I actually won't ruin it because it'd probably be better if people watch the webinar. But basically, I had a doctor's appointment that was kind of my tipping point. And for me, I really kind of felt like I was only hanging on because I really just had a dream to have a child. And I didn't think that was going to be possible. I had read horrible stories online of people who had similar either one of the three autoimmune things where they couldn't play with their children once they had them. And I was like, like, I don't want to have kids if it means that, And
mhm,
so, I always still held out a little bit of hope. And I had a doctor basically sit down and tell me, like, hey, you're never going to have kids. And so I went through a long process. I was going to take my own life. And that's the story I don't want to ruin because it's ironic and crazy story. And so, the irony, I'll say, is that I did go to take my own life. I actually ended up going into a coma, and the
mm.
coma ironically ended up saving me because I came out
Whoa.
of it. But when I came out of it is really where the crux of everything was. And that is, I used to be a boxer a long, long, long time ago. And so I've always had this fighter mentality. And so when I came out of it, I just got very clear. I got crystal clear, very, just it's like that. People say a download, but whatever you want to call it, it just was flooded my body with clarity of like, hold on a minute, you know, what I've been doing up till now is not working. So why do I keep doing this, right? Why am I going back to Western medicine? Why am I following this back? Nothing has gotten better. The other thing was, I'm a fighter and like, I'm going to figure this out. Why did I just try to take my own life? It was like, kind of for me, it was like a cop out.
Mhm.
And it was in that moment I had declared, I'm going to figure this out. And I'm not, hey, if I die fighting for this, then it's worth it. But at least, I'm not giving up until I figure this out. And it was on the other side of that when I tried to dabble in the holistic space that I realized we have a problem here. And the problem was, this is great. And you're always going to, it's always going to be better for you to do that. But for people who are trying to figure it out, it's so scattered, it's so confusing, and it's expensive to try things over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And my journey on that side of it is really what woke me up to the fact that, wow, nobody really actually does this holistically. They say they do, but they're holistically doing it with their modality, right?
Mhm.
And so modalities don't heal you. Your systems and your organs are the only thing that can heal you. And so as I started to do that, I went to pre-med. I did all these things for school, and the cool thing with my pre-med was that it was actually Western um, and holistic, and so I had to study every modality. Well, as I was with all my professors in each modality, each one of them would message me privately, hey, what's this thing you said in class, and
Ah.
um and then they'd ask me, eventually would lead to them asking me to help them with their health. And so they only just kept confirming what I believed is like, this is a really scattered, crazy thing. And look, your body's a system. If you don't operate with it with a system, you're never going to fix things, number one. And number two, I don't care about people fixing things. I want them to be on the other side of it, which is how I live, which is completely invincible. Right. I
Mhm.
don't need anybody ever for anything unless it was a literal emergency of something like a car accident that was out of my control. Anything intrinsic that is building from inside of me, I know what to do, right? Always with this system. So it's getting people on the other side of it to where they get to a point where they go, hey, I don't worry about ever a surprise diagnosis, and I can handle anything. And so I also had to prove that doctor wrong. And that's why I had a 16-year-old, right? So, the fun thing about it for me this second time around was, the typical stuff that they do to women, which is scare the crap out of women nowadays, about having a baby. You're too old, and if you're past this age, you're not going to have it. And I was like, oh, screw you. So when I was, what was I, 46 when I had her?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, it was
Right.
kind of one of those things where I was like, oh, I have to prove it again, So yeah. So it's very fun. And, I was a single mom for all that time that I had my 16-year-old. And She is quite the amazing child. In fact, that picture behind us is one of our books we wrote together, and we're Amazon bestsellers. And let's see, she was about 5 years, so she was only about 11, what, 12, yeah, something like that. But yeah, it's been a journey, and that's kind of it. So that's kind of a nutshell, very, very nutshell of my story. But that was it. So after having no symptoms, it's like I just don't live from that consciousness anymore. But I
Mhm.
also am not one who's like, oh, I listen to my body, or yeah, I take care of myself. It's like I have a system. I know,
Mm.
I know for absolute, not guesswork. And that's the piece we have to shift in the holistic space, is getting people from this, like, I think I'm healthy, or oh no, I'm healthy, I eat right. And it's like, you don't even know what that means. So yeah, so that's it.
Yes, many people don't know what that means. It's like you
uh,
don't know what you
I
don't
know.
know.
Oh,
Okay,
trust me, I get a lot of the health experts in the industry who come to me privately and secretively
yeah.
about their health. So yeah, and it just proves the reason, like, you need a system. That's why I
Mhm.
did what I did.
Okay, so I got a question. Now, you said that you were a boxer, and so you had this mentality about you, right? And
Mm.
you had this moment of clarity, but this moment of clarity came for you like later. It didn't come when you were younger, right? So I guess my question is, how do you think people can kind of get to that place outside of like divine things happening and tragedy? Like, how can we move towards a clarity towards, that mental space that you got to, where you got to the other side?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things. First of all, back in that day, we didn't have social media, and there wasn't as much ease to just reach out to somebody. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
so there, and nowadays we're so information saturated. So there is, there's so much resource available. So like what you're doing for people, that didn't exist back then, so you kind of had to find your way on your own a bit. And I think part of the problem is that I was so strong that I was like, I can push through, and
Mhm.
just, kept pushing through things, and, you know, just thought I'll be fine. And, just the body doesn't care about what you think you're going to do, if you're not dealing with what it's asking for. So, yeah, I think part of that's that. I mean, the thinking and the way of thinking didn't go away. That didn't change. Obviously, I just had a situation that finally got my attention enough and had me listen. But really, true wisdom is being able to listen to. I think one of the benefits for me with wisdom is that I'm the youngest of five, and my siblings are greatly older than me, like 14, 13, 12, and 10 years older than me. And
Mm.
so I got to watch what they would do, and I'd always be like, I'm not doing that, or you know what, I'm going to do that differently. And
Mhm.
that's really wisdom, I think, is not just learning, but watching and going, I don't need to learn the hard way. Like, I've seen them do it a lot. So having good mentors, I think, helps a lot. I think that could help people, because obviously I'm answering a question hypothetically of like, how would it have been for me back then,
Mhm.
had I had these resources. So I think people they have so much, um, there's so much different available now that wasn't then, that I just think that you have to want it. You have to look, you gotta, one of the things for me when I made that commitment was no stone unturned, and a lot of times I think people, they go for something and then they give up really easy. And when you have that commitment and you're clear, this is happening. So even if you don't know the answer, if you're committed to just finding the answer, if you come up against something that doesn't work, you pivot and you constantly keep trying something new, and it'll eventually land. You're always gonna there's no mistake anyway in anything you try. People think it was a waste of time. It's never a waste of time, ever. So I think that's part of it too, is just wanting it bad enough. And we have such a plethora of resources now available that you just have to dive in, get your hands dirty a little.
Yeah, there's so much information everywhere. Like, you
Yeah.
can't use that excuse anymore, really, of
No.
not having the information because it's so easy to find it.
Yeah. And there's a lot of mentors out there now, and people that, like you said, you can find mentors easier. You don't have to go to a brick and mortar. You can, if you're embarrassed, you can do it from your home. You can do it from your phone now. And so there's a lot available.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about the idea of health freedom. That's something that that means a lot to you in terms of having the freedom with your health. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, I mean, it means going from insurance to assurance, right?
Mm,
So it's really knowing, like I said, it goes to that absolute knowing, not guesswork. I don't, for me, just because of what I had gone through, I was like, I never want to step foot in somebody's office from a place of sickness ever again.
mm-hmm.
I always want to come from a place of empowerment. And that was a big thing for me. And so I was like, I want to give this to other people. So like when I designed my program, I included things that give everything, like how to be your own dentist, how to set up your own pharmacy. So if you don't have all those pieces, you really aren't totally invincible, because you still have, it's like you still have a weak spot. You know what I mean? And so I covered every area, like as if you were going to battle, you want to cover every aspect. And it is a battle right now. It is a war. And what we just experienced and started this last year is evidence of that. I had been saying that was coming and was going to happen. And part of it is because, people, they know that most people don't really dive into full empowerment with their health. And I can tell you that my graduates knew better, and they knew what to do and all of that kind of stuff. And that's the kind of empowerment I'm talking about. We don't have nowadays, I think, uh, like, I don't want to say millennial, but like the younger generation, this is what we have to relate to. It's the only thing tangible, because you could talk about things that happened 40 years ago, but if you weren't here, it's not visceral. You're not going to really understand it. But what we just went through and what we're still going through right now is a clear example of people who didn't have didn't have health freedom, right? If you
Mm-hmm.
had that and you were empowered in that way, you wouldn't have nothing like this. It's almost like having your business be resistant to the economy, right? So if your health is resistant to the economy, it's kind of the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Most people, in fact, older people, as they build their business and their wealth, it goes away because they didn't take care of their health, right? They end up spending it all there. And so that, I say, the health of that's an economy all by itself. And so if you think of it just like wealth, it's the exact same thing.
Yeah, you hear that
So
phrase all the time, health is wealth.
yeah,
It's so true though, because like obviously we're speaking to creatives and artists, and they're known for just being consumed by whatever their talent is, right? They're in this creative space and they just kind
yeah,
of get lost in it. But part of the reason why we started the organization is because like you're more than your gift, you're more than your talent, right? It's
100%.
all the things that mentally, emotionally, and spiritually that make you who you are that are most important. And if you're not pouring into those areas, like what are you really doing,
Yep.
because in the end some of that other stuff is going to probably, I mean, it's going to dry up. It's going to only last for so long, especially if you don't have your health.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Suffering is really the piece I talk about, because people always joked with me and be like, oh, do you want to live to like 150? I'm like, no, I just want to live well. Like, listen, if you've suffered like I did, you'll understand that you never want to suffer again. That's all I care about. I want to live well. If I live to 90, I just want to live well. Even if I live to 70, I just want to live well. Like, I want to be at my highest peak vitality and everything for every moment I can. So it's not about living long, it's about living well. You don't ever hear 80-year-olds get to their deathbed and go, the things they regret are never the things that we spend all of our time on from
hmm,
our youth all the way up. It's almost rarely ever hear, what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah,
You
yeah,
rarely
yeah.
ever hear and be like, I wish I had been more connected to source. And I wish I had been more, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, of course, that's what they wish they had focused on. I mean, you never hear him saying like, I wish I had worked more hours, or, I
Right.
had stressed a little bit more. You don't. You always hear him say, I wish I had spent more time on the things that mattered. So yeah, it's very, very true.
Hmm. So is this what your book is about that you wrote with your daughter? Like, what's the title of the book and what did you guys write about?
It is My Reason, My Hero. And it was actually about being an entrepreneur. And it was my perspective of being an entrepreneur and a single mom. And it was her perspective of being the kid of an entrepreneur. So she wrote it from her eyes and I wrote it from mine, like kind of what the benefits. So no, it's more of a business one. It was more about entrepreneurship and all of that kind of stuff.
Okay. So is your daughter already kind of on the path to being an entrepreneur also,
Oh,
like
she
you?
has been since she was young. I mean, for her to write that at that age, and yeah, I used to speak on stages a lot. And so she would come with me, and, I didn't think she was listening, but she was listening. And there was one time I'll never forget. I had one of my sales guys was with me at this event. And this event was a little smaller, and it was a little bit more business like focus, like actual tangible business stuff.
Mhm.
And I see her pacing in the back, and I see her going outside the doors, and I go look outside. I'm like, what is she doing? And I see her on the phone, like she's hustling, like she looked like she's on the stock exchange, and she was like serious. She's like, "Duh, duh, duh, duh." And I'm like, what is going on? And I asked my sales guy, and he goes, oh, she had me just making, she gave me the name and the logo and all these things. So she had me making business cards for this new business she just started. And I'm like, what? And I go out there and I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm starting a business with my friend Celine. And yeah, so we're like halfway, mom, I'll get back to you. Like that kind of thing. And I was like, all righty. So she had already listened to everything at that event and was starting to implement it while sitting in the event, and literally and it was actually phenomenal. I was quite shocked at what she came up with. And she had people working for her already. She had the whole thing.
What?
So, it is funny. I think that is something, if I was to give advice to youth, it's to go surround yourself by the people you want to become. Because when you're immersed in that, if you just stay by yourself and you're there, even if nowadays, if you're doing it audio like this, there's plenty, there's Clubhouse, which is, seems more for adults, but honestly, the smartest youth are going to be in there. I actually have a 19-year-old who I've raised since he was like 8. He's one of my graduates as well. And I'm really close with his mom. And so I've always mentored him, and he's in Clubhouse, and, he's going to be soaring ahead of everybody because of it. So hang out with people that are ahead of you where you want to be, and immerse yourself with it, because that's how she picked up on all that, is just because she was always around it. I
Mhm.
never once told her to do something, or, I never put that on her. I never told her if she was going to have to go to school or not go to college, things like that. It was like, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? Because I've learned, and I think I learned from my own journey, is I see the number one thing I see the most people get stuck on is, I don't know who I am,
Mhm.
and I'll tell you what, you're never going to find out, because life is never about finding out who you are. You get to decide who you are, and you get to create that, you know, and
Mhm.
there's a lot more freedom in that, which is, cool. Well, who gets to decide who you are? Nobody but you, right?
Right.
So
Right.
create it.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because that is a very powerful struggle that people continue to get caught up in. But I always think of it too as like, you are like who you are. There's some things innately about us that we just it's just in us. It's part of our very essence. But
Mhm.
it's like we're clouded. We can't see for whatever reason, or maybe we're not getting the validation from somewhere else that we think we should have
Right.
to really own like who we are.
Well,
So,
that's what that strategy allows us to do. When we sit around going, well, I'm waiting to find out who I am. It's like, well, who are you giving power to when you do that? Right? Everybody else but you. And so it shifts back into, when you say, I get to decide who I am and who
mhm,
I'm going to be and how I'm going to be, that's full empowerment, right? That's also requires full responsibility. And I'll have to say, that's the biggest crux, is that we have a culture that has been trained to not take full responsibility. And that's where we come into a lot of problems. So the minute that we own every single decision, bad relationships to, whatever it
mhm,
is, when you own it all and know that you contributed, or, I chose that kind of stuff, is when you have the power to shift it, you
mhm.
know? If you don't have that remote control, then you can just blame everybody else. When you have the remote control, you get to change that. So
Yeah.
it's such a small shift too. It really is.
Mm.
But that was a big thing for me too, is with my health stuff. I don't ever want to be in a position where somebody else is responsible for my health. Like, that's my job, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, you drop the R word, responsibility. Because so
Yeah.
many times people will just fall into excuses, like they'll listen to you, they'll be like, yeah, well, she's so different. She had it this way, she had it that way,
Yeah.
and they come up with all these reasons when really it's like, no, you could actually have some of the same things Maria has if you would
Just
just
depends
own
how
it.
bad you want it. It
Yeah, it just
really
depends
is,
on
you
how
know?
bad you want it.
Yeah.
So, you talked real quickly about a couple of things that were kind of like your whys or your motivation. It was like you had a dream to have a child when they said that you couldn't have one. You were like tired of like repeat things happening in terms of your health and like nothing being a solution. What is your motivation now in terms of like now you're at this place where you're on the other side, you've shifted, you see things with more clarity. Like what motivates you to keep giving to the graduates and other people and to living your life?
Yeah. I'll say the one thing is impact. I believe like when you, I, that's another thing too. You always hear people like, I'm trying to find my purpose, you know? And yeah, I like to break down all the isms, right?
I love it. I love
Yeah, I do it
it.
in the health space too. I'm the rebel. But it's like you're never going to find your purpose. You're going to create it, you know? So for me, one of the things in my years of training, I send people to a training actually that for the last 20 years that I went through that also made massive, that really for me was the big change and the big shift. And the thing you learn in there is, and it's a massive paradigm shift. So I'm, even saying it is hard without the context. People are gonna be like, yeah, cognitively and logically, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, I get it. But
Mhm.
I'll tell you what, when you actually do it, it's very different than you think. And so the thing is about, one is finding your purpose is about what, like for me, it's how do I impact other people? It's like, how do I leave my thumbprint on this earth? That's all I
Mhm.
care about is what impact am I leaving and creating? And we're always having an impact, at every moment. So when people think they're not, you are, it's just a matter of what impact it is. And
Mhm.
so the thing is in this training, it's real interesting is that the thing that you come for to the training for that you say you want to create in your life, the goal is to find someone else there. And your goal over the next 4 days is to create that for them if that's
Mm.
what they want. So you find somebody else who wants the same thing. And your goal, and in that space between you doing that and reaching them, is
Mhm.
where the magic is, because that's where all your crap comes up. And that's where you'll see everything about yourself, is really where you start seeing like where all your excuses are, how you operate, all of that. And so it's important for us to pay attention to those things, like what's in your way, and all of that. So for me, it's really that. It's like, how do I reach other people? How do I leave a mark? How do I make an impact? That's what gives you purpose, And the irony about that little exercise
Mhm.
is that when you actually make that happen, if you actually help create that with the other person, it's actually how you end up getting it.
Mm.
And that's the juice, right? Because
Yeah.
that shows you that it's really about when you make a difference. And when you make a difference, you're going to feel better and it's going to create that for you. So otherwise, it's just manufactured, right? It's just like, I want to feel this way and I want to create this. It's never going to be the same. That's why, honestly, that's why having kids, that's why people keep doing it, because it's got a visceral effect of like, hey, I've, look at this human being, who's here on this planet. It's a massive change and experience that you can't replicate. Nobody can replicate and you have to experience it. I could tell you all day long what childbirth is like, and if you haven't had a baby, you're going to be like, okay, and then when you do it, you go, that was nothing like you said, right? Because the visceral experience of what you think when you haven't experienced something that's real has a phenomenon to it is
Mhm.
hard to explain. But that's really for me how purpose is, and that's the reason why I do what I do, is because it's like I've learned that purpose is really about what I create.
Maria, how in the heck are you juggling all this? I mean, you're running a business, managing a business,
So
you're
funny.
raising daughters, you've got graduates in a program. I mean, how do you do it?
I don't know. You just do it. Like, I just don't even, when people say that, I just think it's funny because I'm like, I don't know, you just do it, it's like when you have a kid, I was talking about that with my brother. He raises and like helps recover pit bulls, and
Uh-huh.
those are his kids. And he goes, now I understand it a little bit, because he doesn't have kids and that's his kids. And he was saying, you realize, like, when one of his dogs was sick, and he's like, I thought, how in the world did I do this? He goes, you just do it. And I said, I know there's no answer for it. You just do it. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of strategies, of course, that you can do. But, honestly, for me, 15 years ago was way harder. I was full-time
Mm-hmm.
pre-med. I was going to another specialty school for another modality. I wanted to have a certification in, and I was a single mom, and I was building my program. And so doing all three of those at the same time, that was hard. And I had very little resources. I was kind of left with nothing during my divorce and stuff. So I was definitely scared, and my family was not where I was, and I couldn't move because of the divorce. So, I was like, I'm on my own.
Oh.
And honestly, I really believe that when the fire's under your butt, you kind of do more, you know?
Mhm.
Like, when it's easy, I tend to not, like, kind of rise to the occasion.
Yeah.
And I look back and go, I don't want to do that again. It was exhausting. I mean, really was crazy. So I think it's probably relative, because now my life is busy, but it's not the same. And it feels more manageable than it was before. So
So you find time to just do stuff for you, like self-care and like, I mean, do you do that like on a
all day
regular?
long.
All day
Oh yeah,
long.
that's the most important thing. That comes first. So, and if you want your kids to be a certain way, you have to be it. Like, you can't tell them. Kids don't care what you tell them. They don't learn from telling, they learn from watching. So, being the example is really important to me. And my teenager is not a normal kid. Everybody always comments on her, like, adults want to hang out with her because she's so cool and so level-headed and mature, and all that. She seems like she's 25, and but I'm not, it's 100% by example. So those things are priority for sure.
Which again speaks to what you spoke about earlier in terms of surrounding yourself, right, with the right people, because the power of just your presence in her life and how you've shown up.
Yeah, I
It-
think that is actually a really big one that you bring up, because over the years, as I learn, each time, I don't cut people out of my life, but you learn to protect your inner circle of who you spend the most time with.
Mhm.
So I kind of have circles, you know what I mean? And the inner circle, I've upgraded that many, many times.
Mhm.
And as you get older, that's why older people are so funny, because they just don't give a crap anymore, you know? And if we
Yeah.
if we could just fast forward to that, you'd make your life so much easier, when you just stop giving a crap what people
True.
think.
True.
Yeah, and you're just like, I have a real zero tolerance policy now in my life. And so if I had gotten that a lot sooner, but you know what, again, there's no mistakes, and that journey and learning, I wouldn't hear and see things the way I do now. Does that make
Mhm.
sense? That part of building that filter is from those experiences with we call them mistakes, but they're not really mistakes, and it's just part of life. But
Yeah, part of the lessons.
yeah, totally. So I wasn't proud of, certain friends or circles, and at times, but at the same time as well, I used it to teach my daughter,
Mhm.
it was like, I'm human. And, sometimes I used to be one of those suckers who wanted to see the best in people. So you overlook certain things that
Mhm.
you shouldn't overlook, or
Yeah.
you want something more for people than they want for themselves. And you get to a point where you learn, like, okay, I'm not going to want this more than you. And you bow out faster, rather than wasting your time and energy where it doesn't land. So there's all kinds of learning lessons along the way for that too. But it is important that who you surround yourself with, remember, like, that's never like a set thing. You always get to decide that, which means you always get to upgrade it,
Mhm.
and
And
go ahead.
it's sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it's so refreshing to hear you speak of that in a positive light, because if you look in like So a social media context, and the audience that we're speaking to is on social media quite a bit. There's usually all these like memes and different things about like, my circle got smaller, I cut people, and it's coming from a negative space.
Totally.
And it's like, ew, it just makes you feel really icky. Like, okay, you think you're so much better than the people that you're cutting out, but it shouldn't really be about that.
It's a real disease that has happened. I totally agree. I think it's very sad. In fact, I kind of said to everybody, I'm never on Facebook or social media, but I still have that account just because I like to keep up with my family around the world. But that was one thing I said last year, as I said, especially because I'm in the entrepreneur space where I come from, the area is a lot of the woo-woo, spiritual, awakened people. And I was like,
Yes.
let me tell you what, you know, you guys are not after seeing everything. And that was part of it. And I said to people, the minute that we have to cut people off because we disagree with them,
Hmm.
that's communism, and we're feeding that. And
Hmm.
so the minute that, but our culture nowadays is not, no, there's no teaching on emotional health and all that kind of stuff. People don't teach on conflict management, resolution that's healthy, and all of that. And the
Hmm.
minute that you and I can disagree on something and have two totally different opinions and completely respect each other through it, is that's where, we create a space for people to have community and connect. And, that's really sad, but that's unfortunately, that's part of the plan last year, was to divide people. So people fell for that. And I told people on Facebook, I was like, look, I haven't unfriended one person,
Hmm.
you know, because they're human and they have their own journey. And if you can't see beyond people's behaviors to the soul and the person that's there, like, guess what? It's like that. What's that Bible verse about the plank in your own eye?
Oh
Every time you
yeah.
have a finger pointing at you, you've got three more pointing back at you, kind of thing. And it's like,
Yeah, yeah,
look,
yeah.
you're going to be judged the same way that you judge others. And that's just, that's a basic life tenet. That's just the facts of life, that the more we're judging others for how they believe, the more we're going to be judged in the same way. Or it's the judgments we have of other people that we don't even realize are usually the judgments we have of ourselves. And so there's a lot of inner work to do on that, that people have, and just growing up a little bit. I think our society needs to grow up, even the
Mhm.
adults. That's not an age thing. It's a emotional maturity type thing, like, you just learn to love people, not their opinions and not their beliefs.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The inner work is something that I feel never stops, like
Oh, of course not.
always paying attention to the inner work. And I mean, we
People
never
use
arrive.
inner work as their, yeah, they use it as their panacea, thinking it's going to fix everything.
Hmm.
Your inner work should be just to simply discover
Yeah.
what's not working for you so that you can shift, because you can't do anything about yesterday. You can't do anything about a moment ago. You literally can only do something about right now. And so, if that inner work is meant to be, I see a lot of people get stuck in their inner work as if it's crippled, I can't do anything else till I figure this out. It's like, well, then your inner work is your slave. You're not using it to your benefit. That should be for you to go, hey, is this working for me or not? If it's not, perfect. What will? Let's go. And it's that forward momentum, right? It's huge.
Yes, Maria, I love how you simplified defining the inner work. That's like my favorite
You're
piece
so
right
cute.
there. It's like figure out what's not working and make a shift.
Yeah, for sure.
Boom.
Yep.
Drop the mic.
And
That
if
was a
you're
drop the
stuck,
mic.
it's a strategy, right? If you're stuck, it's a strategy.
If you're
That's what
stuck,
people
it's
go, I'm stuck. And I'm like, so what does that give you permission to do? Because that's a
mm,
belief system. It gives you permission for so many things, right? So if we want to
right.
get honest about it, but that's why I've learned that when people really want something, you'll see, that you can make all kinds of excuses of like, oh, that person has this and this, I could never do that. And then here comes the people with the stories where they had nothing and they make something of it. That's grand, and there's nothing special. They just decided so. That's it,
Hmm.
and that's it. So when people really want something, when they really want to make a difference, you won't stop at anything. Nothing will get in your way. Things are going to
Yes.
get in your way. Nothing's going to stop you when it gets in your way.
Right.
That's the difference, because things will get in your way. Especially when you decide to do big things. Just prepare yourself, because that's usually when things start getting thrown at you, and stuff happens. And that's when you got to be ready for that battle and be like, bring it on, and you're not
Yeah.
stopping me. So you can keep trying all you want. It's that mentality that's going to make the difference. And I know your audience is artists, and so the one thing I see with artists a lot is they're so close to their own work.
Mhm.
And that's why you got to get some altitude. And altitude is also having mentors. And the thing is that people pick mentors who make them comfortable. When you pick a mentor who is the opposite of you, or who does not make you comfortable or care about your comfort, is when you'll get that altitude, right? And you'll see what you need to say. Because it's like in the holistic space, I see a lot of people who might be really good in like whatever the health piece they're doing, but they're
Mhm.
not good at the business part. So they never can get a business off the ground. And
Mm.
it's like, see, you don't have to be good at everything. I mean, that's what a CEO does. They don't do everything. They find the right people to do the things. And so it's, you don't have to be everything. You can be your glory of your artist, all that you are. But your job is to find the people who fill in the gaps that you are, where it's not your strengths, you know, have somebody and pick people who aren't going to keep you comfortable or tell you what you want to hear.
Woo! Love it. All right. Well, Maria, I'm not going to have you on here forever because I could go on and on and on. You just have so much. I mean, everything is so good. I'm just taking it all in. I'm resonating with it for myself. Like
I
note
love it.
taking on the inside. But
Good. But that's why
I
you're where you're at, because you got that drive, I love it.
thank you. Thank you. So, as we get ready to wrap up, though, just kind of some final thoughts for anyone that may have been listening and they're like, okay, break it down even simpler, Maria. Like, what should be my next step? Like, I want to be healthier. And because you talked a little bit about like people eating healthy.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many elements to health. And I know just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
kind of in a nutshell, if you're just going to leave somebody with
Yep.
a thought of like, okay, go do this.
I will tell you, because I never tell people what to do with health, because it takes a long process when you're actually talking about the kind of health I'm talking about. However, the number one thing everybody can do is really more about what you stop doing.
Okay.
So literally we are bombarded by chemicals. People have no idea. If you just stop for a moment, just do a little inventory. Do I color my hair? Do I put makeup on? Do I put perfume on? Do I put lotion on? Do I use shampoo with chemicals? Do I wash my, you know what I mean? And your
Mm-hmm.
food and everything else. And so if we just do a little inventory on yourself, eliminate sugar and chemicals and things that turn into sugar, like gluten and heavy carbs and all that kind of stuff, right? And just if you ate organic and no sugar, there's a lot of sugar alternatives like monk fruit and things that are sugars, but they aren't going to damage your body. So it's not like no sugar, because then people go, oh my God, how am I going to do that? There's always things to upgrade. I call it upgrading your vices.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always things for that. But if you just eliminate a few of those things, your body honestly is going to do all the work that it needs to if you just get out of its way. It's usually us who gets in the way. It's just like nature. Nature doesn't need us. It's usually us who harms nature and gets in its way of what it does naturally, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of the same thing. It's usually just removing the culprits.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet. Thank you for that major nugget. And then where can people find you? Like you have a website.
I do. I've been very underground. I've always been an invite only kind of thing. And I've
Okay.
always done either stages or events or like this kind of interview thing in the past. And I give people my webinar. There's an application process in there and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of have to jump through a lot of hoops. And I'm really getting ready to transition with business and doing a lot of big stuff. So I'm not really even working with too many people. It's just tapering off right now. I'm not completely stopping yet. But anyway, just share with people. I'll send you my link for my webinar,
Okay.
because honestly, that webinar, it's a wealth of information. And for a lot of people, it could even tell them what they're doing wrong or what they're missing and put them in the right direction. So, worst case scenario, at least they get that information, and I think it's pretty eye opening if you pay attention to what I say in there, because this industry is very dangerous, and you have to speak in
Mhm.
code. And I don't say things directly. I say them very indirectly. So you have to be paying attention,
Okay.
listening from a different ear. Everybody's listening to just tell me what to take. That's
Mhm.
not the right question, you know? So listen, if you listen to my webinar with really good ears, you'll catch a lot.
Okay. And I would say to check out your book because they can find that on Amazon. My
I
my
think
reason, my
so.
hero.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. It was 2017. I don't even know if they still have it up, but
We're
we
gonna.
didn't do it to
I'm
sell
gonna look
books.
for it.
It was a little collaboration we did. It was fun.
Well, I think it's awesome. A mother
Yeah.
and daughter collabo book. Hey.
I know, it's cool. We had a few other entrepreneurs jump in and do it, so it was really cool to hear people's stories and, to see all of it. So yeah,
Well, I
it's
can't
cool.
wait to check it out. Maria, I want to thank you so much for being my WCW guest today. I think you're amazing and phenomenal,
Thank
and I do
you.
not say that lightly.
You're
Um,
sweet.
so as
Thank
I
you.
Yeah, thank you. So as I get ready to wrap, you guys, you've been listening to For the Artist. This is Melissa Sharee, and I've been on with the one and only Maria Whalen, and we'll see you guys next week.
Bye, everybody.